Tea was an ordinary Saturday that began with burnt toast and a promise. My son, Daniel, was 8 then small for his age, all elbows and curiosity. Had been begging me for weeks to take him fishing at the lake outside town. The same place my father used to take me when I was a boy. I'd been putting it off work, fatigue, the dull gravity of adult excuses, but that morning, when he appeared in the kitchen wearing his baseball cap backward, and holding the plastic tackle box he'd packed himself, I couldn't say no. The sky was the kind of blue that makes you believe in forgiveness. We drove with the windows down, the radio humming something from the 90s, his voice too loud on the chorus. Every few miles he'd ask how much longer, and I'd say, just a bit, and he'd nod solemnly like we were crossing continents. At the lake, the air smelled of mud and pine sap. We set up near the dock. He talked nonstop about school, about the frog he'd seen last week, about how he thought the clouds looked like giant sneakers. I pretended to fish really. I was just watching him. Kids don't realize how much you memorize them without trying the slope of a neck. The sound they make when they breathe through excitement. Around noon, clouds began to gather. 5 more minutes, he said. I agreed. Then the wind shifted sharp, sudden, wrong. The lake darkened, a bruise spreading across the surface. Let's pack up, I told him. He nodded, disappointed, but obedient. I turned to fold the chair, heard a splash, and when I looked back, the world split in two. Before and after. Had reached for the tackle box that had slipped from the dock. 1 second he was there, the next he was in the water. There's a particular silence that happens when something unthinkable begins. It's not real silence, it's the body forgetting how to process sound. Then the noise returned all at once, the slap of water, my shout, the scrape of my shoes against wood. I dove in. The lake was colder than I remembered. The shock stole my breath. I saw him once, his cap floating beside him, his small arms flailing. Then the water swallowed him again. I kicked harder than I thought I could. When I reached him, he wasn't fighting anymore. His eyes were open, unfocused, his body heavy. I wrapped my arm around him and kicked toward the dock, counting every stroke like a prayer. When I hauled him onto the boards, he looked impossibly pale. For a second I froze. Every emergency drill I'd ever learned vanished. Then instinct, or maybe love, took over. I tilted his head, pressed my mouth to his, breathed, pressed, breathed. The seconds stretched thin and cruel. Then he coughed a ragged, beautiful sound and vomited lake water all over my shirt. I laughed and cried at the same time. He blinked up at me, confused. Dad, he whispered. I'm here, I said. You're okay? The rain started a minute later, soft at first, then hard. I wrapped him in a blanket from the car and held him while he shook. We drove to the clinic even though he insisted he was fine. The doctor said he'd swallowed a lot of water, but he was lucky, very lucky. I nodded like luck was a word that still made sense. That night, after he fell asleep on the couch with cartoons murmuring in the background, I sat in the dark kitchen and stared at my hands. They were trembling. There were grass stains on my palms from the dock. I kept seeing the flash of his red cap on the surface, disappearing. The image looped behind my eyes until I wanted to claw it out. For weeks afterward, I dreamed of water. Sometimes I was back in the lake, sometimes I was too slow, or my arms wouldn't move, or the light disappeared before I reached him. I'd wake up gasping, go to his room, and stand there watching his chest rise and fall, counting breaths until mine matched his. Daniel seemed to bounce back faster. Kids do that. Within days he was bragging at school that he'd almost drowned, but Dad saved him. He said it with a grin, like it was an adventure. I smiled along, but inside something had shifted. I started hovering, holding his hand, crossing the street, forbidding him from climbing trees, checking the locks twice. Fear makes you small. It took up space in our house, between us, like a third heartbeat. One afternoon, about a month later, he asked if we could go back to the lake. My throat tightened. Maybe another time, I said. Why? He asked. It wasn't the lake's fault. I opened my mouth to argue, but stopped. He was right. It wasn't the lake. It was the world, unpredictable, merciless, real. That night I found myself in the garage, staring at the fishing rods leaning in the corner. The air smelled of oil and dust, the scent of my father's hands when he'd taught me to fish. He used to say, you can't protect them from everything. All you can do is teach them how to swim. I realized I'd been trying to build walls instead of wings. The next weekend we went back. The morning was gray, the kind that makes color louder. I packed extra towels, a first aid kit, enough snacks for an army. He skipped down the dock ahead of me, fearless again. The water rippled calm. He looked back and said, see, Dad, it's not mad at us. I laughed. Guess not. We didn't fish much. We talked. He asked if I'd been scared. I said yes. He said, me too. But it's weird, I don't remember being in the water. I just remember seeing light and thinking it was you. I had to look away for a second. Sometimes children say things that crack you open like thunder. When we got home, he ran inside to tell his mom every detail. I stayed in the car a while. The reflection in the windshield looked older than it should have. There's a moment every parent meets, the one where you realize love is equal parts holding on and letting go. That day was mine. Over the years, the story became family folklore. He told it at sleepovers, I told it at barbecues, always ending with, he scared 10 years off my life. We laughed, but underneath was a scar neither of us could see. Time marched. He turned 12, then 16, got taller than me, started pulling away, as sons do, more doors closed, more secrets. I told myself it was normal. Still, on nights when he was late, I'd feel the lake in my chest again, rising. One night he borrowed my truck to meet friends at the movies. He was 17. It started raining around 9. At 10, the phone rang. The voice on the other end said, "There's been an accident." I drove faster than I thought physics allowed. When I reached the intersection, the truck was there, crumpled, steaming, surrounded by flashing lights. Daniel sat on the curb, a blanket around his shoulders, a paramedic checking his pulse. His face was pale but alive. When he saw me, he stood, and I saw it again, before and after. Head skidded on wet pavement, hit a guardrail. No one else hurt. The officer said if he'd been going faster, if the rail had given way another inch. Another heartbeat. I thanked him. I thanked everyone. Then I walked Daniel to the car, my hands shaking just like that first time. On the drive home, he said, "I'm sorry, Dad." I said, "You're here. That's all that matters." That night I sat outside his room again, listening to his breathing. The same rhythm, 16 years older, still my anchor. I realized life had been giving me the same lesson again and again. How close everything always is to disappearing. How precious the ordinary is. Now he's 25. He calls sometimes, from a city with better restaurants and worse parking. He tells me about work, about the girl he's dating, about plans that sound both thrilling and fragile. I still catch myself wanting to say, "Be careful," but instead I say, "Enjoy it." Because I've learned that warning and loving aren't the same thing. Every summer we go to the lake. He drives now. We bring sandwiches and a cooler and talk about nothing. The dock's boards creak louder, but the water looks the same, green, endless, forgiving. Sometimes we don't fish at all. Sometimes we just sit with our feet in the water and let the silence speak. Last year, he said, "You know, Dad, I think about that day a lot. I don't remember being scared. I just remember opening my eyes and seeing light above me, and thinking I could get there." I swallowed hard. "You did," I said. "You did." He smiled. "Yeah, because you were there." Maybe that's what parenthood really is, not saving them from the deep, but being the light they swim toward. That night, after we packed up and he drove us home, I stood in the doorway and watched him sleep on the couch again, snoring softly, the same way he had 20 years before. His hand twitched once, like he was dreaming of water. I whispered, "Thank you," though I didn't know to whom: the lake, the universe, or the part of love that keeps dragging us back to shore. If you're listening to this, maybe you know that feeling, the split second that changes everything, the heartbeat between fear and grace. Maybe you've stood by a hospital bed, or on a roadside, or in a doorway at 3 a.m., realizing how fragile it all is. Maybe you've lost someone, or almost did, and since then you hold the world a little gentler. If so, you're not alone. Life isn't about never falling into the lake. It's about learning how to surface, how to breathe again, how to forgive yourself for looking away for 1 second too long. It's about standing in the rain with shaking hands and deciding to love anyway. Tonight, when you check on the people you love, let them know. Say the thing. Turn on the light. Don't wait for another almost. Thank you for spending this time with me. If this story touched you, even a little, please like this video and subscribe to the channel, because maybe next time my story won't show up in your search. And I do really love for us to meet again. End.